I found a hidden door in my new apartment. I should have never opened it. Nens. I moved into this apartment 3 months ago. It was cheap, spacious, and in a decent neighborhood. The landlord barely asked any questions, just handed me the keys and wished me luck. At the time I thought I was getting a great deal. Now I realize why the last tenant left in such a hurry. It started with the smell. A damp, musty odor that seemed to come and go at random. At first I assumed it was just an old building issue, maybe mold in the walls or a leaky pipe. But then I noticed something stranger. The closet in my bedroom would never fully shut. No matter how hard I pushed, the door would always pop open slightly, as if there was something behind it. One night, I finally decided to investigate. I emptied out the closet, shined a flashlight inside, and knocked on the back wall. Hollow. I pressed against it. Nothing. Then on a whim, I ran my fingers along the edges, and felt a thin, cold gap. A hidden door. I hesitated. My gut told me not to open it, but curiosity got the best of me. I found a small latch near the bottom, rusted but functional. I pulled. The wall groaned and shifted. Behind it was a narrow, pitch-black passageway. The smell was stronger now, almost unbearable. It reminded me of rotting wood, and something else. Something organic. Something wrong. I should have left it alone. But I didn't. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. That's when I saw the stairs leading down. The stairs led down into the darkness. Narrow dot. Steep, dot, hetty. Each step groaned under my weight. The smell was thick now, coating the back of my throat like something putrid had been sitting there, untouched, for years. I kept my phone's flashlight aimed downward, revealing crumbling brick walls on either side. The air felt heavier with every step, like the space itself was pressing in around me. This shouldn't be here. My apartment was on the second floor. There was no reason for a basement to exist below it. But there I was, going deeper. Then I saw it. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a door. Not an old wooden one like I expected. This was metal. Rusted. Thick. A vault door. My heart pounded as I ran my hand over the surface. Faint scratches covered it, like someone, or something, had tried to claw its way out. A single phrase was etched into the metal, barely visible beneath layers of rust. Do not open. He is awake. My stomach dropped. A sane person would have turned around right there. Left everything alone. Sealed the closet back up, packed their things, and moved out the next morning. But I'm not sane. I reached for the handle. It was ice cold. I twisted. It moved. The moment the lock clicked, a deep guttural noise rumbled from behind the door. Not human. Not animal. Something else. Then the lights went out. My phone flickered, then died. And in the pitch-black silence, I heard breathing. Very close. The breathing was slow. Deep, put-up. Ragged. Too close. I stood frozen, my fingers still wrapped around the door handle. The air had changed. It was thick, humid, like something had been sleeping behind that door for a long time. And now, it was awake. A metallic scraping sound echoed through the passageway. Something was moving inside. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering in my ears. My phone was dead, but the darkness around me wasn't absolute anymore. A dim reddish glow seeped from the cracks of the now slightly open door. Then a whisper. A voice that didn't belong to any living thing I'd ever heard. I see you. My stomach twisted. My legs felt like lead. I knew I needed to move, run, but I was paralyzed, trapped in some sick, primal fear that made every muscle in my body refuse to obey. And then, it stepped forward. The door creaked open just enough for me to see what was inside. I still can't explain what I saw. It was tall, impossibly so, its body stretched and distorted, almost like a shadow that had peeled itself off the wall and taken form. Its limbs were too long, its fingers tipped with jagged black claws that scraped against the metal as it moved. And its face. There was no face. Just a void, a hollow expanse of nothingness where eyes, a nose, a mouth should have been. Then it lunged. I screamed, the first sound I'd made since stepping into that nightmare. My body finally obeyed, and I turned and ran up the stairs, tripping, scrambling, clawing my way back to my apartment. Behind me, I could hear it coming. Fast on. The walls vibrated as it moved. The air hummed, like the space itself was unraveling around me. I burst into my bedroom, slammed the closet door shut, and threw myself against it. My chest was heaving, my fingers numb from fear. Silence. For a long time there was nothing. And then, 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. Right on the other side of the closet door. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even move. Just sat there, back against the door, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. By morning, when the sun finally spilled into my room, I worked up the courage to open the closet again. The hidden door. Gone. The back of my closet was solid wall. No latch. No passage. No proof that any of it had ever been there. But the smell, it was still there. And sometimes at night when the apartment is quiet, I hear the knocks. 3. Slow. Deliberate. Like it's waiting for me to open the door again. I moved out the next day. Didn't pack properly. Didn't care about the deposit. I just threw some clothes into a duffel bag and left. I told myself I'd never go back. Never. And for a while, I didn't. But then, a month later, I got a call. The number was unknown. But the moment I answered, I knew. The line crackled. The static hissed like something breathing through it. And then that voice, low, rasping, stretching my name out like a secret. I see you. I dropped the phone. My heart was a fist, hammering against my ribs. I had changed my number. No one from that apartment had my new contact. So how the hell did it find me? I spent the night awake, every light on in my new place. My hands trembled as I scrolled through my lease agreement. I wanted to tell myself it was over, but I knew. You don't just walk away from something like that. Then at 3:13 a.m. the knocking started. Not from the door. From my closet. 3. Slow. Deliberate. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My body was screaming at me to run, but I knew. It wouldn't matter. I had never left that thing behind. It had followed me. And then, the closet door opened on its own. The hinges moaned, the wood creaked, and inside, a door. The same one. Same rotten wood. Same iron handle. It was impossible. It shouldn't be here. But it was. And this time, it wasn't closed. It was open. And something was waiting on the other side. Something laughing. I couldn't breathe. That thing behind the door, it knew I was here. I could feel it watching me. The laugh that slithered from the darkness wasn't human. It was wet, like something trying to speak through a mouthful of water. I didn't think. I ran. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the front door. My fingers fumbled with the lock, and in the reflection of the hallway mirror, I saw it. A hand. Blackened. Rotting. Fingers too long. Crawling from the darkness behind that impossible door. I didn't look back. I threw the door open and sprinted outside. The air was cold, sharp against my lungs. My feet pounded against the pavement as I ran to my car. I yanked the door open, shoved the keys into the ignition, and tore out of the parking lot like my life depended on it. Because it did. I drove without knowing where I was going. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the wheel. I checked the rearview mirror. Nothing. No shadowy figure. No twisted reflection. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still with me. I didn't stop until I reached a motel on the other side of town. Cheap. Filthy. I didn't care. I just needed a place where that thing wouldn't find me. I locked the door, bolted the windows, sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone. My call log was empty. That wasn't possible. I had answered the call. I had heard it, but there was no record. No proof that it had ever happened. And then my phone buzzed. One new voicemail. My stomach clenched as I pressed play. Breathing. Deep but ragged. Wrong. And then, "You're still mine." The voice wasn't coming from the phone. It was coming from inside the room. The breath behind me was too close. Hot, dotting. Rotten. But, like something long dead had exhaled against my skin. I couldn't turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to fight, to do anything, but my body refused to move. I sat frozen on the edge of the motel bed, my fingers gripping the sheets so hard my knuckles turned white. The voicemail kept playing. "You're still mine." The words echoed, but the sound wasn't coming from my phone anymore. It was everywhere. Inside the walls. In the ceiling. Behind my skull. Something shifted in the air. The temperature in the room dropped, a sharp, unnatural cold that sank into my bones. My breath fogged out in shaky bursts. And then, the motel TV turned on by itself. Static hissed across the screen. The volume was maxed out, the sound drilling into my skull. And through the static, something moved. At first, it was just a shadow. A smudge of darkness flickering in and out of the white noise. Then the shape grew sharper, a silhouette. Tall, dot-wooden, thin. Wrong, dight. I wanted to move. To turn my head. To see what was behind me. But I was too afraid. Then slowly, the figure in the static turned its head. And looked directly at me. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I couldn't take it. I grabbed my phone and threw it across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud, but the buzzing didn't stop. It only grew louder. More distorted. More wrong. Then the bathroom door creaked open. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even gone in there. But now it was open. And inside, another door. The same door from my apartment. Same rotting wood. Same rusted handle. It had followed me here. And this time, it wasn't just open. Something was crawling out of it. A hand, long bony fingers clawing at the tiled floor. Then another. Arms stretching unnaturally, pulling something through. I couldn't see its face yet, but I knew. It was the thing from the static. I finally moved. I shot up from the bed and ran for the door. My fingers scrambled at the lock, my pulse hammering. The room behind me groaned, the air thick with something old, something hungry. Just as I got the door open, a hand clamped around my ankle. The grip was icy, the fingers too long, too tight. I was yanked backwards with inhuman strength, my knees hitting the carpet so hard I saw white. I turned my head, and I finally saw it. The thing crawling from the door wasn't human. Not anymore. Its limbs were stretched, its skin blackened and cracked like it had been burned from the inside out. And its face. Oh God, its face. There wasn't one. Just smooth, featureless flesh, where eyes, a nose, a mouth should have been. But somehow, I still felt it looking at me. And then it spoke. You let me out. The words didn't come from a mouth. They slithered through the air, vibrating against my skull. You let me out, and now you're mine. I screamed, kicked, clawed. My heel connected with something, and for the briefest second, the grip on my ankle loosened. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled to my feet and threw myself out of the motel room. I didn't stop running. Not when I heard the door slam shut behind me. Not when I heard the laughter echo through the halls. Not even when I reached my car, my hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I didn't stop until I was miles away. But I knew I would never be far enough. Because I made a mistake. I opened the door. And now it's open forever. I drove for hours. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. Just wanted distance. Miles and miles between me and that thing. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't shake the feeling. That I wasn't alone. That something was still with me. The motel had disappeared in my rearview, swallowed by the endless stretch of highway, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking on the wheel. My pulse wouldn't slow. My mind was still back there, still seeing that door, still hearing the voice that had no mouth. You let me out, and now you're mine. The words clawed at my skull. I turned the radio on. Static. I flipped to another station. Static. Every channel was the same. Just white noise, hissing, whispering, shifting. Like something was buried in the sound, trying to claw its way through. I shut it off. Tried to focus. Breathe. Think. But then, my phone rang. The same unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But some part of me, some stupid, desperate part, thought maybe, just maybe, it was someone who could help me. I pressed accept. And for a long moment, there was only silence. Then a wet, gurgling breath. Like something rotting was trying to speak. Then in a voice that made my skin crawl. You can't run, Jason. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop in the middle of the deserted highway. My chest was heaving, my fingers locked so tightly around the wheel I thought they might snap. It knew my name. I hadn't said my name. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat like it had burned me, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. No. I wasn't safe. Not even out here. I needed to keep moving. I jammed my foot on the gas, tires screeching as I sped down the empty road. The headlights cut through the night, illuminating nothing but the cracked asphalt and the endless stretch of trees lining the road. I kept checking the rear view, kept waiting to see it. But there was nothing. Not until I blinked. And suddenly, there was something standing in the middle of the road. I didn't have time to react. I slammed into it at full speed. The impact shook the entire car, metal crunching, glass shattering. But there was no sound. No scream, no thud of a body rolling over the hood. Just silence. I swerved, heart pounding, and the car veered off the road, plowing into the ditch. My head whipped forward, slamming against the steering wheel. For a moment, everything went black. Then, the whispering started. It was coming from inside the car. I lifted my head, vision swimming. The windshield was a shattered mess, the front of the car smoking. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. It was the passenger seat. Someone was sitting in it. No. Something. A shape, tall and thin, its skin blackened and cracked like old leather. Its head was tilted, watching me with the same smooth, featureless face. I could feel it smiling. It lifted a hand, long fingers curling, and placed them over mine on the wheel. Its touch was ice cold, but it burned, sinking into my bones. Then it leaned in, and in a voice that slithered inside my head, it whispered, "Now you're finally listening." My body locked up. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The thing in the passenger seat tilted its head, almost curious. Then slowly, it turned its hand, forcing mine to grip the wheel tighter. And then, it jerked the wheel. The car lurched, tires screaming as it dragged itself deeper into the ditch. My body was thrown sideways, my shoulders slamming against the door. I tried to fight it, tried to pry my fingers from the wheel, but the thing's grip was stronger. And then, in the cracked remains of my side mirror, I saw it. The door. It was right there, standing in the middle of the road, just waiting. It had followed me. And now, it wanted me to come back. The door shouldn't have been there. It was impossible. I left it behind. I drove miles away. And yet, there it was, standing in the middle of the road, untouched, unmovable, like it had always been there. The thing in my passenger seat let out a slow, rattling breath. Its fingers were still wrapped around mine, forcing me to hold the wheel steady. Go back, Jason. The voice wasn't a sound. It was a feeling crawling into my head, coiling around my thoughts. I shook my head. No. No, no, no. I wasn't going back. I couldn't. I ripped my hand away from the wheel. The second our skin separated, I felt the burn fade, like ice melting away. I didn't hesitate. I threw open the door and stumbled out of the car, gasping for breath. My legs were shaking, my vision blurred. The night was too quiet. Not a single cricket. No wind. Just the sound of my own heartbeat. I turned. The thing was gone. Passenger seat was empty. But the door was still there. And it was closer now. I took a step back. Then another. My foot hit the uneven ground of the ditch and I nearly tripped. The whole time I couldn't take my eyes off it. Something moved behind the door. A shadow. Not human. Long fingers curled around the edge of the frame, pressing against the wood, testing it, like something was waiting for permission to step through. I turned and ran. Didn't think. Didn't look back. Just ran. My body screamed in protest, every muscle burning, my lungs aching, but I didn't stop. The trees blurred past me, the cold night air slicing at my skin. I ran until my legs gave out. Fell to my knees, gasping, heart hammering against my ribs. Silence. Nothing but the trees. The dark sky above. The distant hum of the car's engine still running in the ditch. I turned, my breath catching. The road was empty. No door. No shadow. Just nothing. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to think. I had to get out of here. Get help. I couldn't do this alone anymore. I reached into my pocket. My phone was gone. My stomach dropped. I'd left it in the car that was still sitting in the ditch. And now I had a choice. Go back and risk seeing that thing again, or keep running and hope I found help before it found me. I was about to make my choice when I heard it. A footstep right behind me. Slow. Deliberate. A breath crawled down my neck. You can't leave, Jason. I didn't turn around. I ran. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. The voice was still behind me, close enough that I could feel the whisper of it against my skin. You can't leave, Jason. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. But I didn't dare slow down. The forest closed in around me, the darkness swallowing every step I took. I had no idea where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. But the further I ran, the wronger everything felt. The air was thick, suffocating. The trees seemed to move, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Shadows darted between the trunks, just out of sight. And then I heard it. Not a footstep this time. A knock. Slow. Rhythmic. Da. Knock. Knock. Da. Knock. It was right behind me. My body froze on instinct. I didn't want to turn. I knew I shouldn't. But I did. And there it was. The door. Standing in the middle of the woods, where no door should be. But worse than the door itself was what was coming through it. A hand, long and wrong, curled around the edge. Fingers too thin, too many joints. Black, cracked nails scraped against the wood. The second hand followed. Then the suggestion of a face, or something pretending to have one. The mouth was a black void, stretching too wide. The eyes were empty, pits of hunger and knowing. And then it spoke, but not out loud. Inside my head. Come home, Jason. I stumbled back, my breath coming too fast, too shallow. My body wasn't listening. My feet refused to move. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But it was. Because I could hear it breathing. I could hear the wet, shuddering inhale as it pulled more of itself through the doorway. And I knew. If I let it come all the way through, if I let it step into my world completely, I wouldn't be Jason anymore. I would be gone. My body acted before my mind did. I turned and ran again, tearing through the trees, my hands scraping against bark, my feet barely finding the ground before I launched myself forward. The knocking continued. Louder. Faster. Dark. Like something was pounding against the walls of the world itself, trying to break through. And then I saw light. A road. A gas station up ahead. I didn't stop to think. I sprinted for it, lungs burning, every step feeling like my last. The second my feet hit the pavement, I collapsed onto the ground, shaking, gasping for air. The attendant inside saw me. He rushed out, calling for help. Voices surrounded me. I barely registered them. I turned my head, searching the tree line, my body trembling. There was nothing there. No door. No knocking. No shadowed figure stepping through. But I knew better. It wasn't gone. It was waiting. And it was getting closer. The gas station felt too bright, too real. Like a place I didn't belong anymore. The attendant, a middle-aged guy with tired eyes, was asking me something. But I barely heard him. My ears were still ringing with the knocking, the whisper of my name, curling around the edges of my thoughts. Come home, Jason. I flinched. What the hell happened to you? The attendant asked, kneeling beside me. His voice was sharp with concern. I tried to answer. My mouth opened, but all that came out was a dry, shaking breath. Jesus, he muttered. You need water? I nodded, barely. He ran inside, and I forced myself to sit up, my whole body aching like I'd been running for days instead of minutes. That's when I saw it. The forest. It was still there, dark and watching. The trees no longer seemed to move, but something felt off. The road separating me from it suddenly seemed thinner, like the distance between here and there was shrinking. I forced my gaze away. The attendant returned with a bottle of water and a concerned look. You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse. Much worse. I took the bottle with trembling hands and drank deeply, my throat burning as the water hit my dry mouth. It tasted too clean, too real. I needed that, to feel here. But then he said something that made my blood turn ice cold. You one of those campers? I swallowed hard. What? He motioned toward the woods. A lot of people come out here, thinking it's a cool place to hike. But they don't come back. My chest went tight. I could barely force the words out. What do you mean? The attendant sighed, scratching his chin. Happens every couple of years. Someone wanders in, never wanders out. Cops don't find bodies, no tracks, nothing. Just gone. I felt like the ground was falling away beneath me. He kept talking. One guy came running out of there a few months back. Looked worse than you do. Said something about a door in the woods. He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Sheriff found him on the road babbling nonsense. Sent him off to some hospital. Never saw him again. A chill crawled down my spine. I knew it had happened to that guy. He had seen it too. And whatever was behind that door, it wasn't done hunting. The knocking was still in my head. Knock. Knock, Dot. Knock. I shot to my feet, my breath coming too fast. I need to go. Hey, whoa. The attendant grabbed my arm. You sure you're okay? I wasn't. I would never be okay again. But I had to move. I had to get as far from this place as possible. I shoved a shaking hand into my pocket, pulled out my phone. My fingers felt numb as I dialed the only person I could think of. My brother. He picked up on the second ring. Jason? I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Nathan. I need help. Silence. Then. Where are you? I looked at the gas station sign. Route 23. Near some town called Black Hollow. Nathan inhaled sharply. Jason. His voice dropped to something cold. You need to listen to me very carefully. A pause. Then, in a whisper. Do not look at the woods. My heart nearly stopped. Nathan. I croaked. What the hell is going on? The line crackled. Like something was pressing against it, listening. Nathan's voice was urgent now. I'm coming to get you. Stay where you are, and whatever you do. The lights in the gas station flickered. The trees creaked. And then I heard it again. Knock. 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 Pow! Nathan's voice cut through my panic. Don't let it in. The line died. Silence. No static. No beeping. Nothing. Just an empty, unnatural void where my brother's voice had been. I stared at the phone, my breath shallow, my heart hammering like a trapped animal. My fingers were slick with sweat as I redialed. No signal. I looked up at the gas station attendant, my voice barely above a whisper. You have a landline? He frowned. Yeah, but the phone's been out for weeks. Some kind of problem with the lines. Of course. Of course. I was on my own. A cold wind whistled through the lot, carrying with it a strange familiar smell. Something damp. Something old. Something that smelled like the basement. I turned. The woods were closer. I don't mean I had walked toward them. I mean they had moved. The gas station used to sit at least 100 yards from the tree line. But now, it felt like only 50. The branches twisted in the wind, stretching toward me like fingers. I squeezed my eyes shut. Don't look at the woods. Nathan's warning pounded through my head like a heartbeat. I had to get out of here. I turned back to the attendant, my voice shaking. Do you have a car? His face twisted with confusion. Why? I need to leave. He gave me a long, measured look. Then, with a sigh, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a single key. My truck's out back, he said. But I'm not. Sound cut him off. A wet, heavy sound. Like something dragging itself over pavement. The blood drained from his face. We both turned, slowly, toward the sound. Something was coming out of the woods. I didn't see it at first. Just movement. A shifting darkness between the trees. The space where the shadows were too thick, too unnatural. Then a hand. It was wrong. Too long, too thin. The fingers bending at impossible angles. The skin was gray and slick, like it had been stretched over something broken. It gripped the edge of the pavement, pulled itself forward. My stomach lurched. I knew that hand. I had seen it before. I had grabbed it. Back in the basement. It was the thing from behind the door. And now, it was here. A low, wet whisper slithered across the lot. Jason. My body froze. The attendant grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard. What the fuck is that? I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The thing crawled out of the darkness, its limbs jerking unnaturally. It was tall, almost impossibly so, its body hunched and twisted, as if it had been folded the wrong way. Its head snapped up. No eyes. Just smooth, gray skin stretched where a face should be. But I knew it was looking at me. It remembered me. The knocking started again. Knock died in. Knock died. But it wasn't coming from the door in my apartment. It was coming from inside me. Deep in my chest. Like something was knocking to get out. The attendant made a choked sound and bolted. I didn't think. I just ran. I tore around the side of the gas station, my legs barely working, my breath coming in short, painful gasps. The truck. Where was the truck? There. A rusted old Chevy, parked beside a dumpster. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely shove them into the lock. The thing screeched behind me. The sound was wrong, like metal twisting, like something breaking itself to fit through a space too small. I got the door open and threw myself inside. Locked the doors. Shoved the key into the ignition. Turned it. The engine choked. No. 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 I turned it again. The thing slammed into the truck. The whole vehicle rocked. Its long, bony fingers scraped against the window. I turned the key one more time. The engine roared to life. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, tires screeching, and I hit the road going way too fast, the gas station vanishing in the rearview mirror. But not the woods. They were still there. And in the distance, through the trees, I saw it. A door. Standing alone in the middle of the forest. Open door. Waiting die. And I knew. This wasn't over. Not yet. Not until I found out what was behind that door. And why it wanted me so badly. The door. It was just standing there in the middle of the woods, surrounded by nothing but twisted trees and endless darkness. No walls. No building. Just a lone, impossible door. And it was open. Something inside it moved. A shadow. A shape that shouldn't exist. The truck's engine roared beneath me, but my hands wouldn't turn the wheel. My body refused to move. I was staring. Drawn toward it. Like something deep inside me knew. Knew that whatever was behind that door wasn't just watching me. It was waiting for me. The knocking in my chest started again. Knock died. Knock. Knock. Panmani? I gasped, clutching my ribs. The road blurred. The headlights flickered. The whole world tilted. And then, the truck jerked. I snapped out of it, just in time to see a shape in the road. Something tall, something moving. I yanked the wheel hard to the right. The truck skidded, tires screaming against the asphalt, and I barely missed it. But I saw it. For just a second. A figure. Standing dead center in the road. No eyes. No face. Just skin. Stretched too tight. And something behind it. Something even taller. Even worse. I didn't look back. I hit the gas, pushing the truck faster than it was ever meant to go, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I just needed to get to the highway. People. To somewhere that made sense. But, the road. It was changing. The headlights stretched into the dark, but I didn't see any signs. No mile markers. No exits. Just black trees pressing in on both sides, the branches tangled like veins. The road was leading somewhere else. Somewhere I wasn't supposed to go. And then, the radio crackled. The speakers popped with static. And through the broken, choppy sound I heard a voice. Jason. I went cold. My foot slipped on the gas. The voice came again. You took something from us. A burst of static. Then, and now we're taking something from you. I slammed the radio off. But the voice didn't stop. It was inside the truck. Coming from the engine. The wheels. The air vents. Come back to the door, Jason, or you'll never find him. I froze. Find who? And then the worst sound in the world. A phone ringing. My phone. I shouldn't have answered. I should not have answered. But I did. I lifted it to my ear. And on the other end, Jason. Help me. Nathan. My brother. And he was screaming. Then the call cut out. And all I was left with was the road. The trees. And the open door waiting for me in the dark. I had a choice. I could keep running. Or I could go back. Go back to where this nightmare started. Back to the door. Back to whatever was waiting for me on the other side. And find out if my brother was still alive. My hands were shaking. The truck hummed beneath me. The road stretching ahead into the darkness. But all I could hear was Nathan's voice. His screams. My brother. The one person who had been there for me when no one else was. And now he was taken. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. But I knew who was responsible. Or rather, what. I stared at my phone, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The call had cut off, but the screen still showed Nathan's name. His number. Except, there was no call log. No record of him ever calling me. I gripped the wheel, my thoughts racing. I could keep driving, pretend none of this ever happened. But then what? Live my life knowing I left him there. That I ran away while he was still trapped? No. I knew what I had to do. I turned the truck around. The headlights carved through the dark, illuminating the same twisted trees, the same endless road that had somehow led me away from where I had started. But now I was going back. The moment I made the turn, the world seemed to shift. The air became thicker, pressing against my skin like unseen hands. The trees seemed closer, their branches curling in like claws. And the road, it felt wrong. Like it was moving beneath me, pulling me towards something I couldn't see. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then, there it was. The door. Standing alone in the woods just as before. But this time, it wasn't open. It was waiting. I killed the engine and stepped out, my boots sinking into damp soil. The silence was deafening. Not a single insect. Not a single rustling leaf. Just nothing. And then from the darkness, a whisper. Jason. I spun around. Nothing. I swallowed hard, my hands clenching into fists. The air was wrong here. It smelled like earth and rot and something else. Something I didn't have a name for. I turned back to the door. It had no handle. No hinges. Just wood, dark and pulsing like something alive. I stepped closer. The moment my fingertips brushed the surface, the world split open. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was standing in a hallway. Dim poetry. Endless. The walls stretched into shadows, impossibly long. And I wasn't alone. Shapes moved in the dark, shifting just beyond my sight. And then, a sound. Dripping. I turned my head, and I saw it. A trail of blood leading deeper into the hallway. And at the very end, a door, slightly open, with Nathan's voice coming from the other side. Weak, trembling. Jason, help me. I took a breath, and stepped inside. The door creaked open, and I stepped into hell. The room was wrong. The walls breathed, pulsing like a living thing. The floor felt like flesh beneath my feet, wet and slick. And the air, it reeked of rot and blood. I saw Nathan. He was strapped to a metal chair in the center of the room. His head hung low, his chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. His wrists were bound in black, glistening chains, pulsing like veins filled with ink. I took a step forward, and the walls shuddered. A noise filled the air. A laugh. Low, deep pile. Behind me. I spun around, and I saw it. A shape peeled itself from the darkness. Too tall. Too thin. Its limbs stretched unnaturally, like something trying to mimic a human, but failing horribly. Its head was long and featureless except for one thing. A mouth. Stretched ear to ear. And inside not teeth, but fingers. Twitching. Moving. I froze. It took a step closer. And then... Nathan screamed. Jason, run. But I didn't. I lunged for him, reaching for the chains. And the thing moved. Not walked. Glided. Like the shadows carried it forward. A hand wrapped around my throat before I even saw it move. It lifted me off the ground, its fingers ice cold and sinking into my skin, like they weren't just grabbing me. They were becoming part of me. I struggled, gasping, but my limbs felt weak. My thoughts blurred. The thing leaned in, and whispered in a voice that was too many voices at once. You don't belong here. Darkness swallowed me whole. In. I woke up on the floor. The room was gone. No pulsing walls. No breathing shadows. Just the old abandoned apartment I had found the door in. Nathan was beside me, but his wrists were still raw and bruised from the chains. I shook him. Nathan, wake up. His eyes fluttered open, and the first thing he said, it let us go. I swallowed. What? He sat up, shivering. His face was pale. It wanted us to leave. Why? He looked at me, and in the dim light, I could still see the shadow of something moving behind his eyes. Because it knows we'll be back. Ventre. We left the apartment that night. We never spoke about it again. But I know one thing. That door is still there. Waiting. And one day, it's going to open again.